There are birthdays you never forget. Some because of the people, some because of the gifts, and some because of the way the world seems to tilt on its axis, and you realize, in a single moment, that nothing will ever be the same. My 34th birthday was one of those. Not because of a surprise party or a long-lost friend showing up at my door, but because I got fired. Not quietly, not with dignity, but with a kind of cold efficiency that makes you question if you were ever more than a line item on a spreadsheet. My name is Elena Carter. I'd spent the last 7 years climbing the rickety ladder of corporate marketing at a mid-sized tech firm called Vantage. I was the one who stayed late, who fixed the messes, who made the impossible deadlines look easy. I was the go-to for every crisis, the one who could talk a client off a ledge or turn a disaster into a case study. I thought I was indispensable. Turns out I was just convenient until I wasn't. It started with a calendar invite. Quick sync, 9:30 a.m. No subject, no agenda, just a meeting with my manager, Greg, and someone from HR. I should have known. I should have seen the signs. The way Greg had stopped looping me in on big projects, the sudden silence in team chats, and the way people avoided my eyes in the hallway. But I was too busy, too tired, and too hopeful that hard work still counted for something. I walked into the glass-walled conference room, coffee in hand, birthday messages still lighting up my phone. Greg was already there, tapping his pen, eyes fixed on the table. HR, Melissa, a woman I barely knew, sat beside him, her expression carefully neutral. I sat down, tried to smile, and tried to pretend I didn't know what was coming. "Elena, thanks for joining us," Greg started. His voice too bright, too rehearsed. "I'll get right to it. The company's going in a new direction, we're restructuring the marketing team, and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated. Today will be your last day." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When it didn't come, I looked at Melissa. She slid a folder across the table, severance details, COBRA information, and a list of next steps. I felt my face flush and my hands go cold. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to scream, but all I could manage was, "Today's my birthday." Greg blinked as if the words didn't compute. I'm sorry, this was just how the timing worked out." I almost laughed. The timing. As if there's ever a good day to lose your job, your security, your sense of self. I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out without another word. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm. I could feel eyes on me, whispers trailing in my wake. I kept my head high, but inside, I was unraveling. I spent the rest of the day in a daze. I called my sister, who cursed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I texted my best friend, who offered to bring over wine and ice cream. I ignored the LinkedIn notifications and the "sorry to see you go" messages from colleagues who'd never bothered to know me beyond my email signature. I sat on my couch, staring at the severance packet, wondering what I'd done wrong. But as the sun set and the city lights flickered on, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the anger. Maybe it was the stubborn streak that had gotten me this far. I decided I wasn't going to let them have the last word. Not on my birthday. Not ever. I started making a list. Not of grievances, but of everything I'd built at Vantage. The campaigns I'd led, the clients I'd saved, and the revenue I'd generated. I pulled up old emails, performance reviews, and client testimonials. I reminded myself that I was more than a job title, more than a casualty of a restructuring. I was Elena Carter, and I was damn good at what I did. By midnight, I had a plan. I wasn't going to beg for my job back. I wasn't going to send angry emails or post cryptic messages on social media. I was going to do what I did best: solve problems, build relationships, and turn setbacks into opportunities. If Vantage thought they could erase me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke up early, adrenaline buzzing in my veins. I brewed a pot of coffee, opened my laptop, and started reaching out to every client I'd ever worked with. Not to poach, not to gossip, but to thank them for their trust, their partnership, and their belief in my work. I let them know that I was moving on, that I was excited for new opportunities, and that I'd always be cheering them on. The responses were immediate and overwhelming. Clients called, emailed, and even texted. Some were shocked, some were angry, and some were already asking if I was available for freelance work. One, a VP at a major healthcare company, wrote, "Elena, you were the only reason we stayed with Vantage. Let's talk." By noon, I had 3 meetings scheduled for the following week. By 3 p.m., I had a verbal offer for a consulting gig that paid more than my old salary. By dinner, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. The weekend stretched out before me, a blank canvas I hadn't asked for. I could have spent it wallowing, replaying every moment of that meeting, dissecting every word Greg had said, every glance Melissa had avoided. But instead, I found myself energized, almost electric. There's a strange freedom in losing what you thought you couldn't live without. Suddenly, the rules don't apply. The old fears of disappointing someone, of not measuring up, and of being left behind start to lose their grip. I spent Saturday morning at my favorite coffee shop, the one with the mismatched chairs and the barista who always remembered my order. I opened my laptop, not to scroll through job boards, but to sketch out ideas. What did I want to build? Who did I want to become? For the first time in years, I let myself dream without limits. I wrote down everything: consulting, starting my own agency, and even launching a podcast about women in business. The possibilities felt endless, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was steering my own ship. By noon, my phone was buzzing with messages. Word had gotten out. Vantage had let go of more than just me. 2 other colleagues, both women and both high performers, had been restructured as well. We met for lunch, 3 shell-shocked survivors, trading war stories over salads and strong coffee. We laughed, we raged, and we plotted. By the end of the meal, we'd decided to help each other, share contacts, review resumes, and even brainstorm business ideas. It was a small act of rebellion, a refusal to let the company's decision define us. That afternoon, I got a call from a recruiter I'd worked with years ago. She'd heard about what happened and wanted to know if I was open to new opportunities. I told her the truth. I wasn't sure what I wanted yet, but I was open to anything that felt like growth. She promised to keep an eye out and, more importantly, reminded me of my worth. Elena, you're a force. Don't let them make you forget that. Sunday was quieter. I took a long walk through the park, letting the cold air clear my head. I thought about the years I'd given to Vantage, the late nights, the missed holidays, and the sacrifices I'd made for a company that saw me as expendable. I let myself grieve, just for a moment, then let it go. I wasn't going to carry that weight into my next chapter. That evening, I sat down with my sister, a bottle of wine between us. She listened as I talked through my options, my fears, and my hopes. She reminded me of all the times I'd bounced back before, of the grit and grace that had gotten me through worse. She said, "You've always been the one who turns setbacks into comebacks," raising her glass. "This is just another plot twist." I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Anticipation. Not dread, not anxiety, but a genuine curiosity about what Monday would bring. I knew I had a choice: to let this moment break me or to use it as fuel. I chose the latter. Monday morning arrived, bright and cold. I dressed with intention, choosing my favorite blazer, the one that made me feel invincible. I brewed strong coffee, checked my calendar, and reviewed my notes from the weekend. I had 3 client calls lined up, each one a chance to prove to myself and to Vantage that I was more than a casualty of their new direction. The first call was with the VP from the healthcare company. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Elena, I want you to know how much we valued your work. Vantage made a mistake. We're looking for someone to lead our next campaign. Are you interested? I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Let's talk details. The next call was with a startup founder I'd helped land their first big client. He was furious about my firing, but also excited. I've been wanting to bring you on as a consultant for months. Now's my chance. Can you start this week? By the time I hung up, I had 2 contracts in my inbox and a third client asking for a proposal. I felt a surge of vindication, a sense that the universe was conspiring in my favor. I wasn't just bouncing back, I was leaping forward. But the real surprise came that afternoon. My phone buzzed with a message from Greg. Can we talk? For a moment, I considered ignoring him, but curiosity and a little bit of mischief got the better of me. I agreed to a call. He sounded nervous, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. Elena, I wanted to check in. I've heard from a few clients. They're not happy about your departure. Some are threatening to pull their accounts. I let the silence stretch, enjoying the discomfort on his end. That's unfortunate, Greg. Maybe you should have thought about that before letting me go. He stammered and tried to backpedal, but I cut him off. I wish you and Vantage the best, but I'm moving on, and so are your clients, it seems. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. I realized that the power I'd been chasing wasn't in a title or a paycheck. It was in knowing my own value, in refusing to let anyone else define my worth. By Monday evening, I had a new job title, Founder, Carter Consulting. And I had a feeling that this was just the beginning. The first week of Carter Consulting was a blur of adrenaline and possibility. I set up a makeshift office at my kitchen table, surrounded by sticky notes, half-drunk mugs of coffee, and a whiteboard I dragged in from the hallway. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every decision, every risk, and every late-night brainstorm belonged to me. I was building something from scratch. And for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. My first client, the healthcare VP, sent over a contract that made my jaw drop. It was more than I'd made in a month at Vantage, and she wanted me to lead a campaign that would launch in just 6 weeks. The timeline was tight, the stakes were high, and I couldn't wait to dive in. I spent hours mapping out strategy, researching competitors, and assembling a small team of freelancers, some of whom were the very colleagues Vantage had let go. We worked late into the night, fueled by takeout and the thrill of proving ourselves. Word spread quickly. By Wednesday, I had 3 more inquiries, one from a nonprofit, one from a fintech startup, and one from a former Vantage client who'd heard I was the brains behind the magic. Each call was a reminder that my reputation was built on years of hard work, not a single company's approval. I was no longer just a name on an org chart. I was a brand, a resource, and a leader in my own right. But with every win came a new challenge. I had to learn how to manage cash flow, negotiate contracts, and juggle multiple projects at once. There were moments of doubt, nights when I stared at my bank account wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But every time I felt fear creeping in, I remembered that Thursday, the look on Greg's face, and the way he'd tried to make me feel small. I refused to let that be the end of my story. My friends and family rallied around me. My sister became my unofficial business manager, handling invoices and scheduling calls. My best friend designed a logo for Carter Consulting, a bold, modern mark that made me smile every time I saw it. Even my old colleagues reached out, offering support, referrals, and sometimes just a listening ear. I realized that I wasn't alone, not in my struggle, and certainly not in my comeback. By the end of the week, I'd signed 4 clients, hired 2 part-time assistants, and set up a proper home office. I celebrated with a small dinner, just me, my sister, and a bottle of champagne. We toasted to new beginnings, to resilience, and to the power of betting on yourself. But the real test came on Friday afternoon, when I received an email from Vantage's largest client. They wanted to meet. No subject line, just a time and a place. My heart pounded as I read the message. I knew what this meant. They were considering leaving Vantage, and they wanted to know if I was available to take over their account. I spent the next 24 hours preparing. I reviewed every campaign I'd ever run for them, every report, every piece of feedback. I built a proposal that was bold, innovative, and tailored to their needs. I rehearsed my pitch until I could recite it in my sleep. The meeting was in a sleek downtown office, all glass and steel and intimidating silence. The client's team sat across from me, their faces unreadable. I took a deep breath, smiled, and began. I told them the truth about my departure, about my vision for Carter Consulting, and about my commitment to their success. I didn't badmouth Vantage, and I didn't play the victim. I focused on what I could offer: creativity, dedication, and results. I showed them the proposal, answered their questions, and waited. The silence stretched. Then the CEO leaned forward, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Elena, we've always known that you were the reason our campaign succeeded. We want to work with you. When can you start?" I exhaled, relief and pride washing over me. I said, "Monday. I can start Monday." As I left the building, the city felt different, brighter, more open, and full of possibility. I realized that being fired on my birthday wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something bigger, bolder, and entirely my own. Monday arrived with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I woke up before my alarm, sunlight streaming through the window, and for a moment I just lay there, letting the feeling sink in. This was my life now. Uncertain, yes, but also wide open. I brewed coffee, reviewed my notes, and set up my workspace with fresh flowers and a playlist that made me feel unstoppable. I was ready. The first call of the day was with a client who just left Vantage. Their team was eager, energized, and full of ideas. We dove into strategy, mapped out deliverables, and set ambitious goals. I could feel their trust in me, their excitement at the prospect of working together without the red tape and bureaucracy that had slowed us down before. It was a partnership, not just a contract, and I was determined to exceed every expectation. As the day unfolded, my calendar filled with meetings, brainstorms, and check-ins. I juggled deadlines, delegated tasks, and found myself thriving in the chaos. There was a freedom in being my own boss, in setting the tone and the pace, and in knowing that every win and every mistake was mine to own. I felt a sense of pride that went deeper than any promotion or performance review ever had. But it wasn't just about the work. It was about the people. I made it a point to check in with my team, to celebrate their wins, and to listen when they needed support. I remembered how isolating it had felt to be cut loose from Vantage, how easy it was to doubt yourself when the world seemed to move on without you. I wanted Carter Consulting to be different, a place where people felt seen, valued, and empowered to do their best work. By midweek, the results were already showing. The healthcare campaign was ahead of schedule, the fintech startup had doubled their engagement, and the nonprofit had landed a major grant thanks to our new messaging strategy. Clients sent thank you notes, referrals poured in, and my inbox was filled with opportunities. I was working harder than ever, but it didn't feel like work. It felt like building something that mattered. Still, there were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the city was quiet and the adrenaline had faded, I'd catch myself wondering if it was all too good to be true. What if the clients left? What if the work dried up? What if I failed? But then I'd remember that Thursday, the way Greg had looked at me, the way I'd walked out with my head held high. I'd survived worse. I could survive this too. My sister continued to be my anchor. She checked in every day, sometimes with business advice, sometimes with a joke or a meme that made me laugh out loud. She reminded me to celebrate the small wins, to take breaks, and to trust myself. "You're not just bouncing back, Elena. You're building something better," she said one night over dinner. By Friday, I had a new routine. Early mornings for strategy, afternoons for client work, and evenings for reflection and rest. I started journaling again, capturing the highs and lows, the lessons learned, and the moments of gratitude. I realized that success wasn't just about landing clients or hitting targets. It was about growth, personal, professional, and everything in between. That weekend, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. Just a few friends, some good food, and a lot of laughter. We toasted to new beginnings, to resilience, and to the power of betting on yourself. As the night wore on, I found myself sharing the story of my birthday firing, not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. My friends listened, nodded, and cheered. You made them regret it, Elena, and you made us all proud. As I cleaned up after everyone had left, I thought about how far I'd come in just a week. I was fired on my birthday, but by Monday, I built something new, something better. I knew there would be challenges ahead, setbacks and surprises I couldn't predict. But I also knew that I was ready. I was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The weeks that followed felt like a second act I never saw coming. Every day brought new challenges, but also new victories. Some small, some seismic. I learned to trust my instincts, to say yes to opportunities that scared me, and to say no to anything that didn't align with the vision I was building. Carter Consulting wasn't just a business. It was a statement, a declaration that I would never again let someone else decide my worth. Clients kept coming. Some were referrals, others found me through word of mouth, and a few even reached out after hearing about my birthday firing and wanted to work with someone who'd turned adversity into action. I started to see my story not as a scar, but as a badge of honor. People respected resilience. They wanted to work with someone who'd been tested and come out stronger. I invested in myself, too. I hired a business coach, joined a mastermind group for women entrepreneurs, and started attending industry events, not as an employee, but as a founder. The first time I introduced myself that way, I felt a jolt of pride. I wasn't just Elena from Vantage anymore. I was Elena Carter, CEO. The title fit better than I ever imagined. My team grew. I brought on a project manager, a copywriter, and a digital strategist. Each one was someone I trusted, someone who brought their own spark to the table. We built a culture of collaboration, creativity, and mutual respect. I made a point to celebrate their wins, to listen to their ideas, and to create a space where everyone felt empowered to lead. The energy was contagious. We weren't just delivering results, we were making a difference. One afternoon, I received an email from Melissa, the HR rep who'd been in the room the day I was fired. She'd left Vantage too, and wanted to thank me for the way I'd handled everything. She wrote, "You inspired me to make a change too." I realized I deserved better, too. I sat with that for a long time, letting it sink in. Sometimes the impact we have on others is invisible, but it's there, rippling outward in ways we may never fully understand. As spring turned to summer, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The pain of that Thursday had faded, replaced by a sense of gratitude. If I hadn't been fired, I might never have found the courage to start over, to build something of my own, to become the leader I was always meant to be. I realized that sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the beginning of your best chapter. I started sharing my story more openly at networking events, on podcasts, and even in a guest article for a business magazine. The response was overwhelming. Women from all over reached out, sharing their own stories of setbacks and comebacks, of being underestimated and rising anyway. I realized that my story wasn't just mine. It was a mirror for anyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. On the anniversary of my firing, I took the day off. I spent the morning at the coffee shop where I had first dreamed up Carter Consulting, then treated myself to a long walk in the park. I called my sister, who cheered me on as always, and ended the day with a quiet dinner at home. I lit a candle, raised a glass, and toasted to the woman I'd become. I thought about Greg, about Vantage, about all the people who doubted me. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet sense of satisfaction. I'd made them regret letting me go, not with revenge, but with success. I'd built something real, something lasting, something that mattered. As I closed my laptop that night, I felt a deep sense of peace. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, more risks to take, and more stories to write. But I also knew that I was ready. I was no longer defined by what had happened to me, but by what I chose to do next. Fired on my birthday? Maybe. But by Monday and every day after, I made sure they'd never forget my name. Elena Carter. If you've ever been blindsided, underestimated, or told you weren't enough, remember this. Your story isn't over. Sometimes the best chapters start with the worst days. I'm Elena Carter, and I turned my birthday firing into the beginning of something extraordinary. And if I can do it, so can you.